Hey everybody, in this video I want to dive into access reviews, a means to check the assignment of groups, roles, applications for employees in my company and or guests. As always, if this is useful, a like, subscribe, comment and share is appreciated, and make sure you hit that bell icon to get notified of new content and live events. If I think about someone's life cycle through an organization, I can think about, okay, well, I join the company, and when I join the company, maybe I get added to certain groups. I might also get certain applications added to me. I might also get certain kind of Azure AD roles assigned to me, based on what my function was when I joined the company. Well then, maybe after a period of time, I get a new role. Happy dance time, or maybe I get added to some additional groups because my new role needs access to different types of data, because groups can be used to access data collections. I might also be assigning apps and roles via a group. Maybe I now get an Azure Resource Manager role directly. So those get added kind of together. Well then, as time goes on, you kind of get the idea. I take on another new role. If I'm at a company for a long time, I might change roles fairly frequently. And I might get all these different things. And what happens is they tend to just collect. And in all of this process, if you think about it, this just kind of carries on forever. When are they taken away? So for all of this, where is remove? When I changed the role and I didn't need this group or this app or this Azure AD role anymore, where is it? So we have all of these different types of assignments I might give to a user. So I can think about, well, yeah, we have Azure AD roles. Roles that are defined in Azure Active Directory, consisting of permissions known to Azure AD. Then I can think about, well, there's Azure Resource roles, so Azure Resource Manager. So I have ARM roles. Now an ARM role are kind of the list of actions I'm allowed to do for the different types of resources. I can have Azure AD application assignments. So all of these things can be given to me. And then of course we have group memberships. Now, in an ideal world, if I think about actually assigning ARM roles or app assignments, what I should really be doing is giving those assignments to a group. And then by putting people into the group, they get the app, they get the ARM role. It makes it easier to add and remove. I can even do Azure AD roles. And I'm going to say kind of, because for Azure AD roles, there's a special type of group. I actually have to have this is assignable to role attribute set on the group. And then yes, I can put people into that group. I have to assign them. I can't do it dynamically based on a role, but I can assign them and then grant them an Azure AD role. But obviously group memberships could also be things like, well, file permissions, data permissions, other types of checks in tokens, in applications. There's a whole bunch of other things. So generally we try and control things by groups. But we absolutely have all of these different types of things. And I'm drawing this kind of, hey, as an employee, but realize this is not just employees. Yes, this is kind of an employee here, but it could just as easily be a guest. They have a credential, maybe in another Azure AD, a Microsoft account, a Gmail. I can still grant them all of these different things. If it was something like a consultant who does different work for my company, they might constantly bounce around different departments and groups. And so they keep getting all these different permissions and they just kind of build up over time, which is really not a good thing. So what we want to do, I want to be able to review periodically who has this role, who has this ARM role, who has this app assignment, who are members of this group. So we think about an access review. So we create this resource that is an access review. And I can target all of those different types of things. Now, when I think about the access review, I think about a frequency. So how often am I doing this access review? Is it a one-time, hey, I'm just doing this one-time check? Or is it on a certain period? Maybe monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, whatever I want to do. And then, well, who is doing the review? So that's kind of how often. Well, who is doing the review? And I can think about a manager. So if there's a manager defined for the user, I can say I want the manager to do it. I could set a delegated set of people to do the review. I can even say self. Self is actually very powerful. You might say, what's the point in that? People will just say yes. Well, not necessarily. If they understand what it's being used for, I might ask people to say, hey, do a self-review. Do you still need this group membership? Do you still need this app assignment? They can understand there's going to be an audit performed, so you really do need to answer these things honestly. So I can have these different types. Now, sometimes self is not available. I drew up here the idea of an employee, i.e. users, guests. It is actually possible as well for some of them to do it for a service principal. So those kind of accounts we have in Azure AD that are used by applications. So now I can actually go and check, hey, does this service principal still need kind of this role? And we'll get into that. So who is going to perform the access review? And what I can actually do as part of this, I can have an action. For example, I might, if they say they don't need it anymore, I can actually act on what they say. So I could remove it or I could leave it in place. So this is the goal of access reviews. For all of these different types of things, I'm going to create this review that either the manager will do, and if I do manager, I can have someone fall back to do it. I can delegate, because remember the key point is, why is delegate so useful? Why don't I just have the global admin do it? If I think about these different group additions, maybe these different ARM roles, they may be business unit or app specific. So a global administrator who has nothing to do with that business unit or that app has zero clue who actually should or shouldn't need it. And so what you want is if I'm having people review, hey, should this person be in the group, they need to understand the function of it and who should be in it. So here I'd want kind of the business owner to do the review. Just giving it to an admin who manages Azure AD has no clue who should or shouldn't have that role. So I want to delegate it to someone who actually understands who should or shouldn't have it. Now, when I think about this as a feature, when I think about all of these different access reviews, obviously I'm targeting kind of a person. I need an Azure AD Premium P2 license. That's kind of a key thing to be able to actually use this. Now, the people that need the license are the people actually doing the reviews. And if I'm doing a self-review, well, then everyone needs the license who's going to be doing the self-review. Now, the documentation does walk through the licensing required. So here it makes it clear on, well, member users who are assigned as reviewers, member users who perform a self-review, group owners who perform an access review, app owners who perform. So anyone who's interacting with the review needs a license. And likewise, guests, well, guests need the same things. Remember, guest licensing has changed. So it used to be kind of licensing for guests was all based around, hey, for every one person I have licensed for a premium SKU, 5 guests are also licensed. That's really being moved away from. the way it really works now from a guest perspective, so if I think about guest, for guests, you get 50,000 free licenses at whatever your tenant's Azure AD level is. And your tenant's Azure AD level is controlled by what is the highest license you have in the tenant. So for example, if I looked at mine for a second, so if I go to my Azure AD, on the overview screen, you'll actually see license. And you can see I am Azure AD Premium P2. So what this means is that any guest users, I have 50,000 P2s used by my guests. That's when you use the new licensing model. Now to use that new MAU model where I actually pay for the guest once I go past my free 50,000, well, in my Azure AD, I can go to my external identities. So we can see that here, external identities. And essentially to make the change, what we actually do within here is we go to my linked subscriptions, because that's where the billing will go to. And we can see here, I am linked and I am actually using this monthly active users. So I'm not worrying about this 1:5 ratio that we used to have. I have 50,000 free guest users. And then I only pay once I go beyond 50,000 guests, which is quite a lot. So the key point here is, hey, for my guests as well, I can fully leverage this functionality. Now I do want to make a key point. Prevention is always better than trying to respond. So the key point here is, yeah, we're going to do an access review. Do you need this group or this app or this role, whatever that might be? In an ideal world, the provisioning of my users, this is not manually clicked on in Azure AD. I have like a HR system. So I have a HR system that kind of drives all of this. And it can be automated to actually go and add these. And as I get moved on, it would automatically remove them. Now, if I don't have that as kind of my provisioning, another option obviously is use the groups. And one of the nice things I can actually do here is for the group memberships, rather than have it assigned where I manually add people in, I could have dynamic. And when I do dynamic, I can base the membership based on attributes of the user. And what I mean by that is if we jump over for a second, and I actually go and look, we'll just go and look at my groups, for example. Don't know why that's showing up. There we go. Jump back over. If I go and look at a group, and I'm going to look for one that's dynamic. I don't want iOS. But we can see here, okay, Justice League. And the key point here is I have these dynamic membership rules. And this allows me to say, hey, you're in this based on the attributes of the user. In this case, it's job title. But there's a huge number of different properties of the users. There's even these kind of extension attributes that I can replicate and populate. So now I can say based on job title, based on department, based on extension attributes. I can even use custom extension properties from applications. So I could add a certain application ID and then use those properties as well. So in this case, I just did, well, look, the job title has to start with hero. And then if I actually look at the members, well, Diana Prince is a member as well, even though the job title is heroine. So we're all good. We actually have those configured. So if I can avoid static assignment of groups, roles, apps, and instead use dynamic groups, I can start to move away from a lot of these challenges, because as the properties of the user change, as their role changes, then I should be fine. It will get added and removed automatically. But let's be real, that's not always possible. So how do we actually use these things? Typically, I'm going to want a regular cadence. Maybe it's quarterly. I'm thinking about, because of reducing my risk, maybe meeting compliance requirements, I need to run these on a certain interval. As part of the whole process, when I create these access reviews, I do have options. And one of the things I can actually do is, when the access review is kind of triggered, I can do things like send an email. So they will get notified, hey, you need to go and perform an action. There's something you need to do actually as part of this. I can add additional text so they understand what we're doing and why. Now, I drew that as the person. It's the reviewer. That's if it's self, but if it was the manager, if it was delegated, I can send them an email saying, hey, there's an access review for you to actually function. But do make sure these reviewers understand what their responsibility is. Let them make sure they understand why they're doing the access review. So maybe there's some training in advance, especially if it's delegated sort of management. Make sure they understand what they're checking and who should be in that. If it's a self, maybe I make the comment in the email that they get sent in the access review, just explaining, hey, please validate you still need this. These responses you give will be audited for accuracy. Just to understand, hey, I can't just say yes to everything. You're going to set a period of time that this is going to be open for. For example, 14 days. If I'm doing it recurring, make sure the time it's open for is less than how often it recurs. I don't want it running every month and it's open for 40 days. Then I'm going to get this weird overlap. It's not going to function correctly. I can set actions for if they don't respond, what happens? Hey, look, if you don't respond, you get removed. Or the system can kind of make a recommendation based on what it's seen, like have the user signed in frequently, has it been used, etc. So let's actually look, how do I do these things? And I'm going to kind of focus on application. What color did I use for application? I'll try and keep this consistent. Okay, so let's look at app and group first, because they use a common method to actually create this. So let's jump over and we will see this. So if I want to do a review of kind of an app assignment, or I want to do a review based on kind of the actual people in a group, I'm in my Azure AD, and where I'm going is to identity governance. So you can see here, I've got this identity governance. So I select identity governance, and then from here, I'm going to go down to access reviews. And right now, it's doing a quick check, so I've got a couple open. I'm just going to hit New Access Review. Note, I guess before I do that, if you go and look at an existing one, I could kind of actually go and look at the results here. 4 users never actually reviewed it, so not super successful, but I could actually go and see that. Now, one thing I would say, when I create this access review, if I am a group owner, I can actually give permission for group owners to be able to create their own access reviews. So the way we can actually do that is if we actually have that self-service enabled. So if I go, for example, and look at my groups for a second, and then within my groups, if I go to my general, so I have this self-service management option over here. So that enables people to kind of manage group memberships. And then actually in my identity governance and my settings, notice I've got this turned on. Group owners can create and manage access reviews for groups they own, because I can set owners for groups. So if I was to look at Clark for a second, so Clark, if I go to Clark's My Apps, over here, and then I can go to my groups, we'll see group is, Clark, sorry, is actually an owner of 2 groups, so groups they own. And so for those groups, Clark would be able to actually go to Azure AD, look at the group, pick fastest people, and then from here actually has the right to open up access reviews. And once that's finished refreshing, would be able to create a new access review. So you can enable people to go and create access reviews for groups they own. But let's go back to the standard way. From identity governance, I can go to access reviews, and I'm just going to click new. So new access review. Now here I'm picking, do I want to base it on an application, in which case I would select the particular application who has been assigned to users, or I can focus on teams and groups. Now within here I have a choice. I can target all Microsoft 365 groups with guests. So here I'm just focusing on, hey, guest users across any Microsoft 365 group. And if I select this, I can exclude certain groups, or I can target regular kind of groups, and then I would select the group. So in this case, I'm gonna just say select teams and groups, and I am just gonna pick my Justice League group, select. Do I just want to target guests or all users? So I'm going to say all users. And then who are the reviewers? Now notice I could say the group owner, because this is a group. Selected users, so I'm going to delegate to particular people. Users reviewing their own access, i.e. self-review, or the managers. Now if I select managers, notice I have fallback reviewers, because what if there isn't a manager in Azure AD? Likewise, if I select group owners, I can have fallback reviewers as well. But if I select particular people, if I protect self, there is no fallback. There's always particular people I name, and there's always the person themselves. Then I can select the recurrence. Is it a one-time? What is the duration of that one time? When does it start? Or is it weekly? Monthly, quarterly? And notice what it's doing. It's helping me. Based on the recurrence I set, the duration is a subset. It's smaller than the actual duration to make sure I don't get into that weird overlap option. So it's helping me pick a good time. If it is a recurrence, well, what is that recurrence? And then when does it end? Does it end after a certain number? Does it end at a certain date? Never. I'm just going to do a one time. Then we have our settings. So apply the results. So if someone says they don't need it anymore, it will remove them. Or don't. I just want to run the report, but someone's going to manually action it afterwards. If a reviewer does not respond, what do? We'll do nothing. Remove access, approve access, or take recommendations. Based on, as I was saying, the interactions, the system can actually recommend what we think. And actually what we'll see later on is if I delegate a report for someone to review, it will actually give a recommendation when I view that. And we'll see that in a little bit. But I could say, hey, if they don't respond, remove the access. I can send a review of what was done to someone at the end. And this is this enable reviewer decision helpers. So this is where I'm saying it can actually help give me information. Say, look, this person hasn't used it for 30 days. They've not signed in for 30 days. Yes, I want to give that help so the reviewer can see, look, this person probably doesn't need it. And then there are advanced settings. Do they have to enter a comment of why they still need it? Should I send them an email saying, hey, there's this review? Do I send reminders? And I can give additional content. So again, this would be super useful if it was a self-review. And this is a review of access to this group. Please confirm if still required. Answers will be audited. Just understand, hey, what's happening. And then from there, review and create. I give it a name. So in this case, I'll say my JL membership. Check, can't bother type anything, and create. So that's going and creating that access review. That might take a couple of minutes to actually sort of kick in. And what I would see is it would show up here. It's going to say, I think, initiating initially. And then once it's ready, the user can go and do it. So here we can see it's here, and it's initializing. And once it's actually ready, what we'll see happen is as Clark, so Clark is a member of this group. So what Clark will actually see is Clark will get an email. Now this was one I did earlier just to save kind of waiting for it. And it kind of shows, hey look, here's a link to actually perform the review. And here's the comment that you typed in. So they have some understanding of actually what it's doing. Now to actually perform the review, what I'm actually going to go to is this My Access portal. So it's myaccess.microsoft.com. And if I click this review access link, it's going to take me to My Access. And it will show me all the access reviews that are ready for me. Now, I don't think I have any yet because it's still initializing. So we'll try this again in a second. It's always the fun. This is not an instant thing. Generally, this is not like an urgent thing you require. But if we actually go to access reviews. Okay, so here it is. So now I can see the access review has shown up. If we actually jump back over to the other one, so now it's active. We can see that. Also, hopefully, I should have got an email. Yep, so now the email has shown up saying, hey, look, you need to do the review. I'd be able to click that link, and the link will now work. So it's actually now taking me to that particular access review. But I get the same thing if I just go to access reviews. And it will show me, hey, you have this outstanding. And at this point, they will just fill it in. So do you still need it? Yes, I do. I'm the best. I'm Clark, I'm Superman, I need it definitely. So now I have submitted that response. So that is me completing that access review. And this would be exactly the same as if it was for an application. So this process is exactly the same process that is used for both application checks and groups. So that's the method I'm using for either one of those. Now, sometimes it will actually show on My Apps as well. So if you actually have an access review outstanding, you'll kind of see an access review over here as well. So that was the access review for a group or an application. So the way, remember, we did that then is we're using the identity governance. So it's identity governance. And then within identity governance, we just go to access reviews. Now remember, as the end user of that review, the way I actually do the review is I went to myaccess.microsoft.com. So that's how we actually do the completion of it. What about if it's an Azure AD role or an ARM role? So for an Azure AD role or an ARM role, it's actually a function of PIM. So we can absolutely go to identity kind of governance first, but it's really optional because where we're really going to go to is PIM. So we're going to go to PIM. And then within PIM, we have a choice. Is it kind of an Azure AD role? Or is it an Azure resource? And then from there, we do access review. So let's actually see that, because we actually have different choices based on which of those we pick. So now, I'm going to go back over to my Azure AD. And again, I'll show it from the identity governance. But what you'll notice is I'm really going to this privileged identity management. So this is where I start. So I could say, let's do an Azure AD one first. So this is now just opening up PIM. That's all this has done. So now I want to manage Azure AD roles. So I'll select Azure AD roles. And essentially at this point, it's going to look the same. I can go to Role, Access Reviews. I can say I want to do a new access review, and I'll give it a name. So let's say Global Admin Review, for example. Is it one time, weekly, monthly, all those same options? A duration, if it was recurring. When does it end? But notice this, the scope. For this, for Azure AD roles and Azure Resource Manager roles, I can also select service principals. Now, obviously, if I do service principals, I can't do a self-review. I guess unless it's an AI application, it can't say, yes, I still need access. So I'd have to do a delegated review of that. But I can now do service principals as well. But I'm going to stick to users and groups. I'm going to select Global Administrator. Done. Who are the reviewers? So I'm actually now going to do, sorry, not manager, self. So selected users, I want to nominate, and I'm going to do it. So I'm just going to say John, me, select. And then do I want to auto apply the results? So again, this is all the same. What if I don't respond? Preview at the end, advanced settings, all looks the same. Start. So that's now kicking off this new review. Now, once again, I selected the option to get an email, but you saw all the options were the same. I should get an email eventually. But the process to actually do the review is different. To actually perform the review, I do it in PIM, not in my access reviews. So here, I'm not going to bother waiting for that. If I go back to Privileged Identity Management, under tasks, what we actually have from within here is, well, I have review access. That's one of my tasks that is available. So I'm going to select review access for Azure AD roles, and you'll notice it's there, Global Admin Review. So I can go through and notice it has a recommended action based on that last sign-in. And what I can now do is go through these. I can select different people and say, hey, deny, approve, whatever. And I'm going to say all needed and click approve. But you saw it gave me that help. So I've now completed that access review. You saw, hey, they're all approved. If I now kind of went back to my privileged identity management, oops, yeah, I can close that now. If I now went kind of back to kind of manage Azure AD roles, if I go to access reviews and looked at that global admin review, the progress will see 4 decisions and 4 approved. So I can see that is actually completed and we are all good. Note the process to do it for an Azure Resource Manager is basically exactly the same. So once again, I'm in PIM, either directly, and just to show you that I don't have to go through identity governance, if I just go to PIM directly, it's exactly the same. So here I could say Azure resources that I want to actually manage over here. Now I have to select the resource. Now by default it's showing me subscriptions, but I can absolutely change the resource type. Because if I have a role assigned to maybe a management group or a resource group, maybe I want to select one of those instead. So I can absolutely change what the focus is, but make sure you select something that actually has a direct role assignment. So you can kind of go through and you can see all the different things. For simplicity, I'm going to pick just a subscription. Once I've picked the resource, management group, subscription, resource group, whatever that might be, then I can go to an access review. And then it's exactly the same. I can just do new. I would pick the particular Azure Resource Manager role. So maybe network contributor. I mean, I'm not going to go for all of this because it's exactly the same. Once again, I can scope it to users, service principals. The only difference now is it's an ARM role that's known to that resource level, i.e. subscription. I would just pick the role that I want to actually do that check on. So I'll say, hey, network contributor. Everything else is exactly the same. Is it selected users? Is it self-review? Is it the manager? Again, if you do manager, there has to be a fallback reviewer. On completion, advanced settings, all exactly the same. So that now would kick off an access review of the Azure Resource Manager role. Now there is actually one other type of access review, and I'll just show it super quickly. If you are using the idea of access packages, this is this entitlement management where I can group together group memberships, SharePoint site access, very other types of resource people might want to use. Well, as part of that definition, if I go and edit this, and then if we look at my policies over here, and edit my request policy, and go to Lifecycle, you'll see I can require access reviews. So if I turn this on, then I can set a frequency for the recurrence of an access review of this actual access package. So we can do it for access packages as well. So it is there, just kind of be aware of that. So we kind of saw that different option. So if I think about, hey, this, an Azure AD role or an ARM role, well then the review is actually done in PIM. So we do have those kind of two different locations based on the type. If I was doing those access packages, that shows up in my access as well. So that would also be kind of access packages, would be my access. And at the end of all of that, there is actually the option to go and create an access review history report. So you've done all of these things, everything's great. You want to kind of go back and see, well, what's actually happened kind of in the world. If I'm a global admin or a global reader, I can view any of the reports. Otherwise, I have to be the ones that generated the access review. If I go to my identity governance, and let's say Azure AD roles. So you've got my access reviews. So I can kind of see that global admin review. So I can see all of them. Again, I can kind of select that and see the details of it. I can see the audit logs about exactly approved decisions for each of those individual people. But also, if I just go to access reviews under identity governance, one of the things you have is this review history option. If I select review history, it would show me any of the access reviews based on this. So this would be the actual report that I've generated. So if I did a new report, and let's just do test, starting from yesterday, ending, even if I could do that. What is the type of report? I'll select all of them. I'll do all of the different results possible. Now it's going to go and kick off the report generation. So the status is requested. So I've actually gone and requested it to create that report. See if I can refresh. So it's not available yet. So it's actually going in the background and generating that report. But once it's complete, I'll be able to actually go and download that report and it will give me details. Okay, so it's finished. And if I open the file, here we can see all of those different reports I did. So we can see, hey, look, the JL member, not reviewed yet. So I can see one has been approved. Those other three have not reviewed yet. And then that other report, I can see they're all approved. And I can see the justifications. So it's giving me the full detail actually of those reviews. So there you saw me kind of, hey, I could go and get the information directly from the actual access review and look at the audit log, but I can also do this review history in identity governance to get really good information, and then I could maybe store that so I have that great historical log. So that was it. Access reviews, really a phenomenally powerful way to go and look at what is actually still required, either getting people to self-review, delegating it to the app business owners who know who should have it. Maybe for some things it's the manager, group owner, whatever I need to do. But one time, periodic execution, just way for me to minimize my risk by making sure people just don't have this build up of massive number of roles and make sure I'm staying in compliance. Hope that was useful. Until next time, take care.